my study, I'm looking into the factors that determine wages and household income in different U.S. states. So the title is essentially which economic, regional, and demographic characteristics explain the difference in average state wages and income. So this looked into demographic composition of states such as gender, race, citizenship status, with different labor market conditions being employment and unemployment rates, and seeing how that affects states' hourly wages and household income, along with having regional effects that I created. So different research questions I have are how do demographic characteristics influence hourly wages and household income across U.S. states from 2000 to 2023? How strongly do employment and unemployment rates predict state-level hourly wages and household income after accounting for these demographic characteristics? And do U.S. regions differ significantly in hourly wages and household income, even after controlling for demographic and employment characteristics? So just some background significance. I'm an economics major, and I thought it'd be interesting to look into the factors that affect why states have different wages and household incomes. But at the same time, for like government officials, seeing if employment rates generate higher wages and income, then why not spend more money investing in creating jobs in those states? So it would just be useful for government officials and then just common knowledge. So this is my data set. Each observation is just a state year. So you can see the state has an hourly wage of this, average household income, and essentially I had to generate this just by computing weighted averages by grouping, because the data coming from the ACS was individual households. I had to calculate weighted and mean averages for each state by state year, and this spans from years 2000 to 2023. And then I also wanted to capture regional differences, these regional effects, maybe because cultures are different in some regions, or just like the environment can create different wages and incomes. So I classified 4 different regions in my study: the Northeast, the Midwest, the South, and the West, just using these 5 state codes, which I'll get to. So the dependent variables in my analysis were hourly wages and then average household income in these states. And you can see this is pretty normally distributed, but I'm mainly going to focus on my model that goes after average income. So you can see it's pretty bright skewed. So in my regression analysis, I actually transformed this variable by taking natural log to my dependent variable. It makes interpretation pretty easier than the percent changes, but also just to transform due to this not being normally distributed. And I just had some other charts. I thought it was interesting just knowing older states have higher hourly wages just by itself, which makes sense as you expect older populations to have more experience to climb through the ranks of their job. And there's also just racial distributions. But I also had control for time in my study because obviously due to inflation, productivity, hourly wages have gone up throughout the years. And the household income basically said the same trend. So looking at these regional effects, I created these maps. So this is just the average hourly wage by state in 2023. And the lighter the color, the higher hourly wages in that state. And you can kind of tell that there's differences between like these 4 regions that I have. So especially in the West, you see high hourly wages in like California, Oregon, Washington, but also in the Northeast. And this trend, this is the 23-year average, and it kind of shows the same trend, lighter colors in the Northeast and the West, versus South, there's much darker colors showing lower hourly wages, and then it's the same trend for average household income, lighter colors in the Northeast and West, and this will also be shown through my regression analysis as it kind of aligns with this analysis. So for the methods I use, I'm just using multiple linear regression, using the demographic variables as controls, and then looking at the employment and unemployment rates and how they affect hourly wages, and then how it's a log household income. So I'm going to focus on model 2 because it had a higher R-squared value, and then when I look at the diagnostics for it, it pretty much satisfies all the assumptions of linearity here in this plot. All of these observations are on the GPU line, given the normality, and then as well as constant variance, and there was no average points. And I also checked for multi-collinearity in my model, and I had to, because I had a categorical variable as one of my predictors in my model, I had to use this generalized GPIF value to look for multi-collinearity, but all of these values are pretty low. It's only a real concern concerned if you're like around 5, but most of these values are under 2. Kind of just asserts that there's really no multiple linearity in my models of these predictors correlated with one another that high. So when I looked at my model's results, focusing on the region variables right now, you can see I use, Chris mentioned, the northeast region, the outlier regression is the omitted value, is the reference group. So as you can see, the Midwest has around 11% lower wages compared to the Northeast. The South has around 14% lower wages compared to the Northeast, and then the West has around 9.9% lower wages or lower annual household income compared to the Northeast. And all of these variables are significant, which shows that there are differences in these regional trends that affect household income, which could be due to like culture, like I said, or just urbanization. With California having how industrialized, how urban to the big cities, and then the same thing in the Northeast with New York, Philadelphia, Boston, all these big cities causing, and then as well as cultural norms in this area. And then also worth noting for the employment rate is this as a 1 percentage point increases in the employment rate, the average household income is expected to increase by around 2%. So this kind of shows, like I was talking about earlier, the significance that if more people are employed, you're expected to have higher household incomes. But what I thought was interesting was also the unemployment rate had a positive metric here. It wasn't as significant, or it wasn't as large, but they were both significant, but it was not as large as the employment rate. So it kind of shows that maybe during times of unemployment, they'll raise wages, which will increase your annual household income to keep you to stay at your job, so you're not searching around for a better job. But yeah, so there definitely are like regional, like geographic location is a factor that shapes economic outcomes. States in the Northeast and West, like I said, have higher wages and household incomes compared to those in the Midwest and South. These differences persist over time, as you saw the average as well as just in 2023. They could reflect like structural problems such as industry concentration, urbanization, and then just economic development in the area. So like in the South, a lot of agricultural states, especially in the Midwest and South, a lot of agriculture, less urbanization can cause, less household income in those local areas. And then just demographic patterns provide additional context that I kind of use in those controls in my study. But states with older populations tend to have higher incomes, they have more work experience. And then there's just a lot of variation in gender composition, racial composition, citizenship rates that affect wages and household income. So limitation I would say is I wasn't able to, my data only spanned from 2000 to 2023, I wasn't really able to capture like some real historical trends. But then also I think the biggest like limitation of my study was not looking at like county level data and looking at the differences between like urban and rural counties, because like obviously California as a state is gonna have higher like household income, but when you look at different counties in California, like outside of LA, San Francisco, the big cities, you'd probably expect differences in lower household incomes as a lot of urban area